I'm going to read to you a passage of the sacred texts. Today's reading comes to us from the Book of the Way, chapter 1, verses 1 through 6. So please, I want your utmost reverence. Um, I'm not going to be held responsible for whatever happens if you're not being reverent. Okay? With that being said, please open your ears and let the word of the sacred texts shine upon you. And it came to pass, in the days of confusion and scattered speech, that the people did desire to speak, yet spake not. For they had beheld many lessons, and heard many phrases, yet their tongues remained bound. And they said within themselves, Surely fluency is not for us. But lo, there arose a path, not of endless memorization, nor of scattered words without form, but a way, ordered and true. And the voice spake, saying, Lay first the foundation, set the words in their proper place, discern the pattern, and the tongue shall follow. For it is written, A word alone is but a stone, but words set in order become a house. And those who walk this path shall no longer grope at speech, but shall form it, line upon line, structure upon structure, until the tongue is loosed and meaning flows without striving. Therefore, let the student take heed. You better listen. This is not the way of wishing, but the way of fluency. He who beholdeth and practiseth not gaineth nothing, but he who studieth and buildeth, even in small measure, shall surely speak. Thus it is written, and thus you shall learn. I can't with this. Okay. Okay. All right. If you're watching this, I'm going to make the assumption that you're wanting to learn Spanish, okay? I'm going to assume that either you've tried to learn Spanish in the past and have failed miserably, like the failure you are, or you've been on the fence about learning Spanish and therefore you've been looking for a sign. In that case, this is your sign, and or you just want to give it a shot. Either way, if that's any of you, then go ahead and grab a copy of the syllabus that I have attached in the description below. It's this one right here. This is what I'm going to be discussing in this video. I'm going to go through each item per item, and hopefully by the end of it all, you'll make the decision of whether or not you think this course, if you can call it that, is for you. All right? So I'm going to take it from the top. Hopefully you have your copy at hand. So let's get to it. First of all, course information. The course title is The Way of Fluency Spanish Edition. Now, The Way of Fluency is the name of the channel itself, and for the foreseeable future is going to house information that's going to help you learn Spanish. Okay? Now, as far as reasoning why the course, to be honest, is for me to have fun. If you can see by the setup, I just want this to be a chill environment. And this is going to be a bit of an escape for myself from my day-to-day activities. So nothing serious. And I will just go ahead and make the disclaimer. Please do not take me seriously. Stuff might come out of my mouth that makes no sense. So that's fine. I'm just telling you ahead of time. But I do want to actually help you learn Spanish. So the information that we'll be presenting will help you towards that end. Now, instructor, that'll be myself. Hi, my name's Kevin Estrada. Yeah, nice to meet you. No, I'm just kidding. Information to help us get acquainted. This is not my main line of work, like I kind of mentioned already. I primarily work in the healthcare field, and as part of my daily obligations, I use Spanish on a daily basis. In addition to that, I have a certificate of medical interpretation from the Tennessee Language Center. That's a mouthful. And I've tutored Spanish in the academic setting to a variety of people of different ages and backgrounds. English is my second language. Spanish is my first language, but it just so happens that I learned both languages when I was very, 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 very young. Therefore, I'm in a stage and point in life where I'm basically native in both of them. So I say all this to say that I know a little bit, teeny weeny bit of Spanish, and hopefully I've compelled enough information to help you share some of that information so that you can learn Spanish. Duration of the course stays unknown. That is not a typo. That is accurate. It's just me, myself, and I working on this, and it's taking me forever to even have enough to get this started. I will go ahead and say the course itself is not finished. I have a bit of a pilot that is what I'm gonna use to see where this goes. So for the foreseeable future, that will be the content that will be presented in a somewhat funny way. And depending on how that goes, then I'll make decisions of where to go from there. Materials. I would love if you could have a note-taking device of some sort, whether that is a physical notebook or a digital notebook. Reason being, it's been my experience that even though I want this to be somewhat of a relaxed, chill environment while I'm just having fun with myself at the same time talking with people and sharing information to help you learn Spanish, it has been my experience that if you have something with you where you can write with, you can write your questions, make connections, whatever the case might be, you tend to learn better. Okay, so that's just a suggestion. It's not a prerequisite. It's not like you're gonna burn in hell if you don't bring your device, but the book says otherwise, so I'll leave you to that. All right, now let's talk about course prerequisites. Technically, there isn't any. All right, if you have the syllabus in your face, I'm not gonna read that part, but there's two things I would like you to keep in mind. Number one, I am primarily going to be speaking English. I'm addressing an English speaking population. Therefore, I would love if you are native like or a native English speaker. If you're not, just be warned. You might struggle a little bit if you're not that strong in the English language. So that's really the reasoning behind that. Number two, I want you to have a genuine desire to learn Spanish. Even though this is going to be a relaxed atmosphere, if you're trying to learn phrases because you have a trip coming up or you want to woo your next lover, this ain't for you. All right? I'm telling you ahead of time. This course is a little bit different from traditional courses you might be familiar with. In addition, this is not one of those, okay, here's 20 phrases for you to get started speaking Spanish and be on your way. It's not it, okay? This is going to be a bit of a deep dive. We're going to do some deep studying of certain aspects of Spanish. It's going to be a slow build up. So if you have any other plans, just keep that in mind. I'm telling you ahead of time, okay? So, course description. This course is designed to teach students the words, rules, and concepts of the Spanish language. Simple enough, straightforward, to the point. Course objective: to provide students with the knowledge, tools, and frameworks needed to become autonomous Spanish learners. Now, I will make a pause here. Notice that I did not say the objective of the course is to help you become fluent and or give you fluency or anything for that matter. The objective is for you to become autonomous, and there is a reason for that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip over to my little board. Hopefully everything is working. Let me make sure that everything makes sense. Okay. So notice that I said I'm going to make the assumption. I don't even know what I'm saying at this point. I'm going to make the assumption, and it's a broad assumption, okay, that anybody watching this and continues to watch it is starting at ground zero, meaning you know nothing about Spanish, nothing whatsoever, nada, zilch. My goal, ideally, is to take you to a point that I call 100%, but it's a different 100%. What I mean by this is, I want you to reach a point where you don't need me anymore. You don't need me, you don't need the content, you don't need the information. Your training wheels are off, and you're on your own learning Spanish however the hell you please. The reason being is, nobody can teach you fluency. Nobody can give you fluency. Fluency is something that you develop yourself, okay? As a presenter of this information, if you can call it that, or whatever you want to call me, there's only two things I can do. Number one, I can present information, and number two, I can explain information, all right? But, it is you who has to grab this stuff, and you have to use it. Okay? If you don't use it, you're not going anywhere. All right? Think about this for a second. We live in a time and age where information is instantaneously available. You can go to online, use any AI product you want, and you can download the fullness of Spanish in like 2 seconds. Like, it's ridiculous how quickly you can access practically all sorts of information. And yet people still don't learn. Why? You still have to put it together. You still have to assemble it. You have to assimilate it. You have to grab the info and you have to actually use it. Therefore, if you decide that this course overall is not for you and or you don't watch me ever again, which that will make me sad, just take this with you, please. If you see any content anywhere or any course being sold, whether that's on the business side of things or in the academic setting, that said that they're going to give you fluency, they're going to make you fluent the next day, or if you do 3 or 4 things that they give you, you're going to be speaking like a native the next day, it's all BS. I don't say the full words so I don't get banned from YouTube, but it's BS, okay? It doesn't work that way. All I can do, all anybody can do that is presenting Spanish information is present it and explain it. That's it. You have to use it. Hence, you will not hear me say in this course that the objective is to make you fluent, because I can't do that. You have to do the work. I'm just going to give you as much as I can, and if you do it, then and only then you will be on your way to developing true fluency. Okay? Let me go ahead and delete this stuff and let's go back to our little above. Okay, we're back. All right, so course objective. Now, course content. Let's get into that because that is where things get interesting. So, actually, I had to go back to the... Here we go. This course is going to be a bit different from traditional courses. I primarily divided this into 2 broad sections. Let me see if I can draw a somewhat straight line here. On this side, I'm going to draw what I call the foundation. And over here, I'm going to draw the assembly. Now, I do apologize for the writing. I'm still getting used to this thing. It's kind of hard to write on this digital board. All right, so if you notice on the foundation side of your syllabus, there's a couple of subcategories. There is the sounds, the words, and the anchor. And then if you flip your pages, you will see the assembly line. So I'm going to focus primarily on the foundation part first. So let's start with the sound. The logic for that name, it's somewhat self-explanatory. And by the way, I would say this, the naming conventions and all the stuff that you see, like the terms, terminology, whatever, it's my own. It's not official. It's just me having fun and making stuff up. We're going to start things with sound. At least I've chosen to start things with sound. Why? Well, why not? The book said so. But in addition to that, you're here, I'm assuming if you want to learn Spanish, it's because you want to speak Spanish. Well, if you want to speak Spanish, guess what? You have to speak Spanish. And I don't say that to be an ass. I do mean it. You have to speak. It so happens, though, for whatever reason, that students hesitate when it comes to speaking. They panic. They don't say a single word until it's too late. And I found that it tends to be more because of how they think, and it's a mental block more than anything. So I took it upon myself to say, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and teach sound from the very beginning. And I've structured this in such a way that if it flows, you will be able to practically make every sound in the Spanish language and pronounce Spanish without knowing a single word. Okay. Within that subcategory of sounds, there are 3 lessons. The first lesson is going to be vowels. Now, why? Believe it or not, vowels are what control whether or not you develop a proper accent. If you want to sound as naturally as possible and as native-like as possible, you need to hone in on vowels, okay? Because I lost my train of thought there. Once we're done with vowels, the next video is going to be consonants and syllables. I'm just going to abbreviate it as consonants. Now, this basically means we're going to cover the alphabet, the Spanish alphabet, but we're going to do it in a bit non-traditional way. I've covered what I call single letter consonants. I've also covered what I call double letter consonants. And I've covered unique syllables, meaning in the Spanish language, there's a couple of syllables that are unique sounds that are present in the language. Therefore, my goal by the end of that lesson is that you will be able to pronounce practically every sound in the Spanish language. All right? As a matter of fact, even after that course, you will have access to a syllabary that I've made, and I'm looking for it right now over here. All right, so by the end of that, and I'm going to flip back over here to my other side. By the end of that, you're going to have access to this. It's like a syllabary. This is just part of the table. It's not the whole table, which means I've set up the vowels with the consonant in such a way that you will be able to make practically every sound in the Spanish language. That's the objective with those two lessons. Just by knowing those two lessons and applying the information presented, you'll be on your way to speaking Spanish like a native. Pretty much guaranteed. After lesson number 2, which is consonants, we're going to go towards lesson number 3, which is what I call stress. And this, sorry, I forgot to change you guys to the screen. Where's the thing? Here you go. I call this stress, and that doesn't mean stress as in I'm stressed out. It simply means stress of pronunciation. Now, here's the interesting thing. In the English language, there is no way of knowing where the stress of pronunciation goes in a word. Okay, every word has a syllable that carries the majority of the force. So if I say detail, that D part has the full force of the stress. There's no way of knowing that in English. As in, how do you know whether it's detail or detail? Now, I'm aware that people say both ways depending on the region and part of the planet that speaks English. But you get the gist. Word for word, you don't know where the stress goes. You just have to know the word to do that. However, in Spanish, you are able to actually pronounce words without knowing them. There are rules in place that tell you where the force of pronunciation goes in a word. So by the end of that lesson, hopefully, you will be able to look at any word in Spanish in written form that you haven't heard or seen ever before, and you will be able to pronounce it. That's the idea behind that lesson. So once we're done with those 3 lessons, we'll be done with the sound portion. Honestly, you'll have everything you would need to practice the pronunciation of Spanish. And the cool part is you don't have to know a single thing about Spanish. I don't care about if you know the words or anything pertaining to the language. The whole focus of those lessons is to focus on the sound. And by completing those 3 lessons, you'll have everything you need. Like, hopefully that will take away the fear of pronouncing Spanish so that when you get to the actual Spanish content, the actual words and rules and how do you say this, how do you say that, you will have an easier time doing that. The next part of the foundation half is the words. I call it the words. This is simply a little portion where we're going to talk a little bit about theory. Now, people panic when they hear the word theory, but fear not. I don't mean theory in the traditional sense of an academic setting. What I'm going to be doing is presenting one lesson that I call parts of speech, and I can't write apparently, and word order, okay? I'm going to abbreviate it because it's a long word. If you've ever studied English in the academic system, you know this stuff, okay? Parts of speech is nothing more than what's a noun, what's an adjective, what's a verb, what's an adverb, so on and so forth. And word order is simply how do you grab those words and how do you sequence them in such a way that you're able to carry a complete meaning. The objective with that lesson is to give background knowledge, because once we get to the assembly portion of the course, or the other half, I'm going to be using some of that terminology. So I'm going to present that on the word side, give you some background knowledge on how language works overall before we learn anything about Spanish. The whole purpose of this is to prime you, so that when you see stuff on the other lessons, you'll be like, oh, wait, I remember that. Oh, yeah, I saw that. Oh, okay, cool. Right? It's not first thing you ever seen, you're breaking the ice. All right, so that's going to be the portion of the words. Once we're done with those 2 sounds and words, we're going to go to practically the core of this part, which is the anchor. Now, this is where we actually going to start learning Spanish stuff. The first lesson is going to be personal pronouns. Now, why personal pronouns? Good question. Let me answer it for you. The reason I'm starting things out with personal pronouns is they are, in my opinion, my humble opinion, they're single-handedly the most used words in the whole Spanish language. Any language, honestly. If you don't believe me, go ahead and record yourself speaking English for a whole day, and then at the end of the day, play back the recording and count the number of times you use a personal pronoun. You're going to be surprised, probably. Now, in addition to that, personal pronouns are a set, limited amount of words, meaning they're fixed. There's no It's like what, 6, 7, or 8, 7 words maybe. Once you know them, you know them. Okay, it's a very short vocabulary list, and they will give you a lot of usage. The reason being is personal pronouns are the perfect segue towards verb conjugation. Now, in the Spanish language, if you know anything about Spanish, conjugation tends to be one of the biggest topics and or the biggest challenge for native English speakers, because English doesn't have conjugation to the same extent or degree as Spanish does. Okay, and it can be a little bit overwhelming depending on how you approach it. So we're going to start things with personal pronouns on that lesson, and after that we're going to cover verbs and conjugation. Now, that lesson is going to be an overview. I don't want you to learn anything specific about conjugation or verbs in general. What we're going to be studying is what are verbs, how do they behave, what are the endings, how do you conjugate them. I'm going to prime you, give you some background knowledge so that we can then put it together into actual Spanish. Once we're done with verb conjugation, we're going to learn our actual true first verb. And actually, I'm gonna delete this whole thing so that you can see. Our next lesson after that is going to be part 1. We're going to learn the verb ser. This will be the first true verb / true word in the Spanish language that you will have to know. And we're going to study its conjugations. Well, actually, no, I misspoke. We're not going to study the conjugation. We're going to study one conjugation. Now, once we study the verb ser in its basic form, we're going to move over here to what I drew earlier as the assembly line. And this is the part of the course that is different from other courses you might have experienced before or that you might be familiar with. The reason being is as follows. Instead of going broad and learning a bunch of vocabulary, a bunch of grammar stuff, little phrases here and there, I decided to isolate myself into a verb. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab the verb said, in this case to be, and we're going to study it in depth. We're going to run it through a series of, let me see if I can write this, series of lessons, okay? It's like a funnel, if you will. And by the end of those, what you're going to get is a series of ideas, right? Let me draw this like that, like that, like that. Okay. So in other words, we're going to isolate ourselves to one verb. And every time we cover an aspect of Spanish with that verb, we're going to generate an idea, an expressive capacity that is native to that verb. In other words, we're going to build Spanish around one verb. The reason I chose to go down this route, or I'm trying this route, is it doesn't matter what verb it is in Spanish that you're studying, you're going to start to see patterns, chunks that keep coming back and keep repeating no matter what verb you have. All right. In addition to that, every verb has a set number of expressiveness that can be expressed. I don't know if that makes sense. There's only a certain number of sentences that can be said with that given verb. So what we're going to do is we're going to build sentences or skeletons, if you will, that are unique to that verb. Let me give you an example. Once we're studying the verb to be in the form of ser, which is one verb in Spanish, just as a side note, the verb to be in Spanish, in order for you to cover the completeness of it, you have to know 4 separate verbs. Okay, and those are going to be the verbs that we're going to be studying. If you grab the syllabus and you look back on the assembly line, it says ser followed by estar followed by haber followed by tener, and there's a series of lessons under each one. Okay, so we're going to be, that's the pilot, that's what we're going to be studying for the first portion of this course. But going back to what I was saying, every time we cover a lesson, so if you notice, for example, here it says verb ser, and then lesson number 8, it says articles and nouns, right? In that lesson, we're going to cover articles and nouns. By the end of that lesson, not only will you know how to use Spanish nouns and how to put them together and whatnot, you're going to have an equation, if you will. It looks something like this. ARNN plus ser plus AR now. Now. And if you don't know what this is, that's perfectly fine, okay? You don't have to know. I'm just showing you. You're going to have a structure like that. That, in my head, is an idea. So this right here, that idea, you're going to have it. You're going to have, as we go through the verb, you're going to have a collection of ideas by the end of the verb study. This, looking at this equation, I can start building Spanish sentences using the verb ser or the verb to be in Spanish. So I could say something like, let's see, el hombre es, es americano, which means the man is American. I can also say la mujer es una maestra, which means the woman is a teacher. I was able to make both of those sentences by using that skeleton or that structure. Now, part of the reason I like this approach and I want to give it a shot is in order for you to create these sentences, right? First of all, I give you the breakdown of Spanish concept, the Spanish grammar, whatever the case might be. And then I give you the skeleton. With that skeleton, you will be able to apply everything you have learned. So learning here is not done in isolation. For example, for you to be able to create a sentence like the one I just made, you have to know the Spanish word for men, the Spanish word for women, the Spanish word for American, the Spanish word for maestra or teacher. The Spanish word for teacher. And you have to know the conjugations of the verb ser. So in this case, this right here, this is conjugated. This is the verb ser, or to be in Spanish, conjugated. So you have to know that, you have to apply it. You also have to apply the word order, meaning how do you sequence these words in such a way that they deliver a complete message. So in other words, this sequence over here, or this funnel, we're going to add vocab to that, and we're going to add grammar. So all of it is going through it, which means we're grabbing all this material and we're putting it together towards a final product. That is the end goal with this. It's almost like we're trying to make a cake. So we grab all the ingredients and we make a process that at the end of it gives us the cake. I believe, in my humble opinion, although the book backs it up, this one over here, that by doing it this way, you will learn much quicker because you're putting everything together in a way that makes sense and delivers a complete message. In addition to that, you're not learning things in isolation. It's not just vocabulary over here, grammar over there, phrases over there. It doesn't work that way. In addition to that, I firmly believe that being able to generate sentences in the language tends to be the biggest uphill battle for most students. And I do believe that is the true engine that will enable you to become fluent. Being able to put everything together and spit a complete sentence that has a complete meaning and is grammatically correct, making use of vocabulary, grammar, and word order all in one place. All right? Now, once we finish our study of a verb, you're going to have a sheet basically with a bunch of structures, a bunch of skeletons of sentence types that you will be able to make with that verb. So what happens when we're done with the verb? Well, we just go back to the beginning. We go over here to the beginning, we change the verb, we study a new verb, and we repeat the process. Therefore, I'm going to make this disclaimer. It's going to be kind of repetitive, as in you're going to get tired of either the verb or the lessons themselves. And that's part of the plan because I want to have repetition present throughout this process so that you get to the point that you're so tired of it that you know the verb. As in, you will be able to no longer use my equations and just create sentences at will. But in other words, we're going to be studying verbs. We're going to do verb blocks. We're going to do in-depth verb studies. All right. So if it might not be for you, hence why you need to make a decision, I would say watch a couple of lessons and see if you like it because it's going to be repetitive, but it serves a purpose. As we move through verbs, you're going to start having sheets of structures, and the objective, big picture, once I finish with these segments and I add more content to the course, is that you will have a booklet, if you will, of verbs in Spanish with all the structures of the sentences that you can make. And you, at that point, will have the knowledge, the vocabulary, the grammar, the concepts to be able to just string sentences one after the other, after the other, after the other. Okay? Gaining speed in sentence creation is what gives you the fluency. All right? So, this is the idea of the course. This is what I have been working on for a good little bit of time now. And honestly, there's so much stuff to cover and so much stuff to do that the course is not complete. But I do have enough. I feel comfortable enough to go ahead and get started and present it and see how people take to that and if it goes anywhere. All right. So that is the presentation of the course. If anything of what I said interests you, then hey, you know what to do. You've been in YouTube long enough. Go ahead and like and subscribe so that you can keep track of the lessons as they come. And yeah, that's pretty much all I have right now. So you are dismissed. Go ahead and keep the copy of the syllabus, and I will be seeing you in our next meeting. All right. Take care. Don't die.